Good morning. Today is 25th of May. I'm here today with Alan. I know Alan from the BCS Consultancy Specialist Group, where I first met him when he was joining as chair, and I second his motion. And since then, I have been the pleasure of being with him as part of the committee. Alan is a seasoned consultant. He has a lot of experience, and he's an expert. He has been an expert in many different fields, including digital transformation back in the day, and now he's quite an expert in artificial intelligence. I probably am saying things that you may want to correct me. Yeah. Good morning. Good afternoon. Good evening.
Yes. Good evening. Yeah, it's great to be here. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't class myself as an expert in artificial intelligence. I am consulting in it at the moment. So I guess for me, artificial intelligence is just the next wave of IT innovation that I've consulted on. I've been consulting for the best part of 4 decades now. And I've worked my way through successive technology waves, and they've got more and more exciting over time. And AI is just the latest exciting technology that I'm consulting on.
Well, the structure of today's presentation, I'm going to make 2 questions, but these 2 questions can be expanded. So the 2 questions are very simple. Is how is it like to be in your role, and what challenges you face to get there? However, instead of jumping to them, I'm just going to make them a little bit, let's go one step at a time. So tell us a little bit more about the different hats that you might be wearing. And the first question will be, what you like the most on them?
Okay, so I joined the IT profession straight from school an awful long time ago, and I've been an IT professional throughout my working life. And I've really worn 2 hats continuously throughout that time. One is as a consultant in IT management, helping organizations to onboard new technologies, particularly at the innovation edge of IT. And the second is as an academic, where I've been a researcher, and I've contributed to organizations like the BCS and the Chartered Management Institute before that, and trying to move forwards the knowledge base that we have to do our work with. I mean, circling back to consultancy, I've worked for mainly large consultancies, PA, BT, Bupa Capita, and KPMG, and I've held roles from. I've never been an analyst. I entered consultancy as a consultant after my MBA, and so I've always been a senior consultant. But I've also spent about 10 of those years leading consultancy practices. So I've been a practice leader, and those are my 3 roles really. One is as a consultant, working with organizations, usually large, public and private sector. The second is as a consulting leader. Those 2 are closely related, so leading consultancy practices. And the third, almost in parallel, is this theoretical or academic role. Not always in academia, sometimes in academia, but not always in academia, where I've been developing theory as part of my doctorate, and then which is LBS, and then in a postdoctoral capacity. So those are the roles that I've had, and they kind of fit together quite nicely in some ways, and in some ways they don't fit together that well. Yeah, that's what I've been doing.
Thank you. Yeah, I think quite a exciting experience, right?
Yeah, well, it looks better on paper than it works out in practice, and it might be worth just elaborate on that just for a second. In the UK, academia is double-edged. It's very much something that people have gone into and stayed in. So, and there's an academic career path to professor, via a PhD. And our society has a role for academics. It's not a very practical role. And then in business in the UK, we tend not to have a particularly high opinion of academics as practitioners. So I've tried to bring the two together, trying to make sure that the consultancy that I do uses the very latest research, and is quite empirical, because a lot of consultancy is not that empirical. So it's based upon evidence, and the aim has always been to try to get the clients the very best consulting through the application of well-documented and well-done research. And in academia, the aim has been to be both relevant and rigorous. So a lot of academic research is very rigorous, but it isn't really very relevant to practitioners. Practitioners, most academic papers don't get read by practitioners. And so I've been trying to kind of bring the two together for 4 decades, and it's hard. In the UK, it's hard. I think it's easier in other geographies, and it is getting easier over time, because one of the interesting things about AI is that the academia and practice have come very closely together, and for a variety of reasons. And so strangely enough, as I get towards the end of my career, all the pieces begin to work together much better than they did earlier in my career.
How much do you think that, because that's not very common to find people that are equally, well, maybe not equally, but they are pushing in both direction, academia and business, right? They are two sectors that they don't speak with each other, or traditionally they haven't spoken with each other. So I guess that being a master of both worlds is not that common.
No, but I think I've always felt that's a pity, because when I was an academic, because I did spend about 7 or 8 years in business, working in business schools, and in that period I was doing quite a lot of consultancy, but I was my day job was as an academic. What really struck me was just the sheer amount of value that there was certainly that time locked up in academia, which could be applied in the field, but never got beyond the journal paper. And so some of my work was actually about taking that and moving it into organizations, and particularly in the era when IT strategy was being onboarded in organizations. And so I've always felt that actually it's a pity that we don't, in consultancy, make better use of the research that is undertaken, particularly in the business schools. And what we are now seeing in AI, for example, is what happens when practitioners, particularly the tech companies, the Googles and the Metas and the Microsofts, establish strong linkages into academic theory, particularly around AI. Most of the AI stuff that we are now applying originated in academia and has been brought into the tech companies, and the result is quite a powerful combination. I think the fault really lies in the linkage between academia and practice. There's in most fields you have what's called translational research. So you have pure theoretical research that's underway, and then there's another bunch of people that do translational research, which translates it into into its applications in the real world. So you might have pure research in nanotechnologies, and then that gets translated into applications in engineering and appears in products. In the business field, we don't tend to have quite that middle ground of translation. The business schools go off and do what they do, and consultancies and business practitioners go off and do what they do, and the linkage between the two isn't that strong. Anyway, that's what I tried to do, and it kind of worked. I think it probably worked at its best when I didn't tell anybody I was doing it.
I just got to pat my back, because you were saying that everything is coming, is being smoother. That difference, that gap is getting closer. And
in AI, I think it's closer. I think I don't think it's getting closer in areas like organizational theory, for example. Where
the question is, because
still there.
Right now we can see that AI can help to automate many different tasks. And I have been reading, listening, and recently I have read about the use of generative AI to try to explore. So if academia develops new or finds new theories, how that can be applied. So the idea is that probably with this AI, for any disciplines, we have tools, or we're going to have tools, maybe not now, but maybe in a couple of years, that are going to help to close that gap, proposing relevant businesses. Yeah,
that's true. That's true. I hadn't really kind of noticed that, but you're right. So the potential for, because one of the problems you have as a business practitioner, and indeed a practicing consultant, is that most of your time is taken up with the day-to-day activities. And it's not just most of your time, because in consultancy, people are working very long hours. They have done forever, and will probably continue to do so. And so you don't have a lot of time to kind of go away and connect into academia. But you have, and so the prospect that we could have agents, artificial intelligent agents, or generative AI agents, who bring that to us in a conversational way is highly likely. I mean, it's not highly likely. It's what's going to happen. So I guess at the moment, what the generative AI tools are largely trained on is the internet, which is which does reflect some of the research in academia, but I don't think the generative AI tools are trained on deeply on research papers. But that's because they're general, and they are foundation models. And the explosion that is beginning, but is likely to be a huge explosion over the next 2 years, is in taking the foundation models and then in various ways getting them to be much more specialized around a particular body of knowledge. And this could be a body of knowledge in companies, which is getting a lot of attention at the moment, but it could be a body of knowledge in academia as well. So you might have, so for example, if you were a change management consultant, you might have a very smart, intelligent agent, which has not just got the knowledge of the internet to work on, but it has also assimilated all of the research papers around change management. And so you could have it could be like having a business school professor sitting, or several business school professors sitting there and advising you as you are conducting your business practice or your consultancy practice. And I think that is terrifically exciting. There is no question that is the way it's going to go. So consultants, I know consultancy best. I think consultants will be incredibly empowered over the next very small number of years with these numerous AI agents, which will have a number of effects for them. One of which is to improve their practice. So they will get smarter because they are surrounded by these super intelligent assistants, but also it will make them more flexible, because at the moment the problem that you have as a consultant, or the one I've experienced, is that you have to do the work that comes to the consultancy. And often what comes to the consultancy and comes to you as a consultant or a practice leader to allocate out to your consultants is not work that you've done necessarily before. You've done similar work, but you may not have done exactly that. And then you've got the problem of how much time have I got now to onboard the deep knowledge that's relevant to this client's particular problem, which is a problem that we haven't encountered as a consultancy before. And indeed, one of the great attractions of consultancy is that often no one has encountered it before. So, but now the generative AI era, or the era that's being labeled super intelligence, will allow us to have these intelligent agents helping us as consultants to be even better. I've got no doubt that that's the way it's going to go. I've no reservations that huge numbers of consulting jobs are going to be obliterated by AI. That's just pure fantasy and utter nonsense. But the quite opposite will happen, particularly for consultants. Our clients want us to be even smarter than we are.
Yeah,
we're not smart for our clients, and generative AI allows us to bridge that gap too.
I think we're going to see a reshape on the profession, and I think we are not going to be doing what we were doing 5 or 10 years ago, and what the kind of things that we are going to be doing might be much more exciting, and we will be able to learn and to engage with new technology, with new scenarios, with everything faster.
It's great. I mean, it's you never have enough time as a consultant to go off and do the research that's needed to give your client the very best edge. You and your client the very best edge. Now I think increasingly we'll find that these generative AI tools will be cheap and accessible, and they're only a mouse click away. Well, in fact, they're not even going to be a mouse click away. They'll be a voice prompt away from because the keyboard is probably not going to be the main way that we interact with them, but they will be just at our disposal to take us to a new level. And I know that people aren't necessarily going to agree with me, because it is ego bruising, because it actually says to us that we have to admit that we weren't that we weren't the perfect experts and advisors, and that we like to project, or the consulting industry likes to project. A big 5 consultancy will rarely tell you that they don't know everything. They're more likely to tell you the opposite. But actually now we are going to get closer to what we've been pretending that we are, which is we are going to get very, very smart about known knowledge, and then that becomes really quite an exciting time, because it means that an individual consultant can do far more than they used to, in terms of breadth and in terms of depth. So and that would be really good. So I think that once the consulting industry gets its head around generative AI, and we're all getting our head around generative AI, I think people will realize very quickly that this is going to be a huge source of growth for expert advisors, because it will become a lot easier to marshal together and curate advice than it has been in the past.
I want to retrack the questions, because I think I have a few questions that I would like to follow up.
Yes.
Just going to list them, and then we go into one by one selectively, and you can ignore as many as you want. The first question was, one of the first questions is, what is what you like the most? Then I want to ask you also, what is where you see that you contribute, that you add more value, or how do you think that a consultant adds more value? Then I have another one, which is, what do you think in the consultancy profession people need to have a stomach to deal with? So what could be, I mean, if something puts you off, you shouldn't be a consultant. For example, if you're going to be working long hours, if you are not happy with that, maybe consultancy isn't for you. And lastly, it will be, if you can tell a little bit of what are being the major challenges, or what will be the major achievement that you will need to accomplish to get into a role or into a position similar to where you are today. And there are many different questions. If you want, we can go for the first one, which is just what is what you like the most?
Well, I was attracted to consultancy for a number of reasons. I think the primary reason is because certainly in the 80s and 90s, when I came into consultancy, 1980s, 1990s, a long time ago, consultants were helping clients with their most pressing problems. So consultancy has changed a little bit over the years, but at that particular time, that's what they were doing. And so it was a terrific opportunity to help clients with the smartest techniques, addressing the most difficult problems. And so that I found very attractive, and it really became quite good at it. So it became a bit like kind of a virtuous cycle. So and so it's really the ability to help clients at a very senior level to address their problems, which drove me. And you can make huge amounts of difference in very short amounts of time. It's spectacular how consultants arrive. They have something which is called the external perspective, and the advantage of being an external person. And there's a whole body of theory which says that if you're trapped in a system, working in a system, you're part of an organization, you don't necessarily see the problems of the organization in a good way, in a empirical way. So we arrive from outside. Sometimes we address the problems that they've got before. Sometimes we're just using our generic consulting skills to address a problem which is new to us. But you can make a very big difference very, very quickly. The other thing that attracted me was that you get to work with so many different organizations. I lost count of the number of organizations that I've actually worked for, but I think on LinkedIn I took about 180 organizations, and that is an underestimate. And so you get to become what I call an organizational tourist. You get to wander around the world in remarkably senior relationships, usually with the C-suite, and you get to see so many different organizations, and they are all different. And so it is a phenomenal privilege to be a consultant. So those are the things that I particularly like. The things that I kind of
the next one will be the value. So
the value. Well,
a consultant at more value.
Yeah, I've kind of touched on the value.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really strange being a consultant over the last 40 years, because we've been haunted by this notion that consultants borrow your watch to tell you the time, and maybe some consultants do, but what I've really been heavily focused in on is making sure that that the value is very clear, and consultants over this period have been aiming for at least delivering 4 times their cost in terms of value. So in terms of demonstrable value, it's not always cash releasing, because sometimes the value that the client needs is different. But
I'm just going to interrupt for a second. When I mention values, what I mean is for not that seasoned consultant, what would you recommend to grow to be able to deliver more value? Or what are the skills that you have, or the knowledge or the contacts or any other thing that helps you to excel?
Okay. It's quite a complex mix. So I would say one of the things that the great consultants, I don't want to label myself as a great consultant, but my track record is good and long as a senior consultant. So but I think in that role, one of the things that you absolutely do need is a focus on delivering value. Strangely, you're not there to make yourself look clever or to generate fees. You're there to create value for the client, and so it's often called a delivery focus or value focus, or client focus, a client first ethos. There's all sorts of different terms in different consultancies, but great consultancy is really heavily client focused and heavily value delivery. They don't hire us for anything else, really. So there is that. There are some things which enable that, and some of them are fairly technical. So I have a first degree and a master's degree in computer science, and I have an MBA and I have a PhD. And my PhD is a vocational PhD. It's a management science PhD. It's from the London Business School. And so all of those things, all of those academic side of things, are a good preparation for being a consultant. You find an awful lot of consultants are quite well qualified. The MBA used to be the kind of golden route to being a consultant, but consultancy has become a much broader church, and so it's there are many different routes in now, including the apprenticeship route. So I think the academic side of it is quite important. The client needs to feel they can trust you, that they can have confidence in you, and one of the things that gives them that confidence is the academic credentials that you can field. Alongside that, there are professional credentials which we typically pick up, and I'm a chartered IT professional from the BCS, and I've got there's so many vendor certifications that it all gets a bit silly, because you keep having to onboard the latest technology, and so that also both enables you to do the work, but also gives the client tangible confidence that you are that you can do the work. And the third thing that we typically bring is our consulting skills. So I was trained in consultancy at Cranfield, and then at PA at Sundridge Park, and so there is a body of knowledge about how to conduct consultancy, and the client doesn't always know anything about this, but they do experience it in the way that we interact with them. How we arrive and very quickly start to do things which impress them, and that's because we have these consulting methods which we learn. So I think that those are kind of foundational blocks, onto which is then added some level of experience, And there are different routes through consultancy. I mean, in the big five, you typically start off, and the strategy house, you typically start off as an analyst and cut your teeth, learn the ropes by doing analysis for the client-facing consultants. And then you move on to being a consultant and a senior consultant, and then practice leader, and then if you're lucky, you join the exco of these companies as a partner. So there is that area of experience as well, which just is a function of time. So those are the kinds of things. I'm not really personally sold, because I am a bit old school. I'm not really personally sold on the idea that you can shortchange those things. I think that you do need, if you can, and you want to be a consultant, it is definitely worth taking the time to get the academics in place if you can, to get the professional certifications in place if you can, and to get trained in consultancy if you can. If you can't, there are plenty of good consultants around that don't carry those badges and those experiences. If you can't, then you can learn it on the job. But I do think it's almost, because it's a profession, it's almost incumbent upon us to try to put those foundational blocks in place, just as if we were a surgeon or a lawyer or or an airline pilot.
I completely agree with that. Well, we have been together in the BCS consultancy for a while already, but I completely agree with what you said. This is a profession, and there are some concepts that a practitioner should be aware of. You may have exceptions, right? As profession, we should try to make sure that everybody is fine. And that consultancy skills, I think they can go a long way. The problem is that to learn these consultancy skills, sometimes it's not something really easy, because it's something that you need to practice on the field with people, and you don't always have the opportunity, right?
Well, I think that's true. I think also consultancy is a very broad church now. It includes areas like project and program management, which we wouldn't have seen as consultancy 4 decades ago, but is now an important service that consultancies provide into clients. They also are being increasingly used as kind of a short-term source of very willing, smart people. So we saw this in the COVID period, when the government needed people very rapidly. It needed an army of people rapidly to roll out the vaccine, to do testing and get things running in the COVID response in the UK. And it turned to the consultancies for smart short-term, an army of smart people to do what it had never expected or hadn't anticipated it would need to do. So you can find yourself in a consultancy doing all sorts of things, and that is fine. And also we have got a good historical track record of people coming into consultancy, having done something spectacular in industry, and then not quite knowing how to kind of onboard them thoroughly. We put them through a quick sheep dip this is the way you do consultancy at this big 5 consultancy, and typically 6 weeks or so, and then you're thrown in. And it's not that you're thrown in without support. The support is there, but you do feel, I think people do feel they're kind of thrown into the deep end in consultancies very early, and they learn very quickly. It isn't that they're thrown in without support. I would stress there are managing consultants around who are helping them. But in many ways, the only way to do consultancy, or say the only way to learn consultancy, is often to do consultancy. You can learn the techniques in the classroom, in the consulting skills courses, but the only real way to find out how to do it well is to get on and do it. It is a practice.
Perfect. I think that you have also answered the latest question. So not only the values, but also what challenges, what do you think will be required to be a corporate consultant? Maybe in your way, you may want to describe any additional one.
I think the challenges of being a consultant are changing. So, and consultancy is changing. It used to be the case that you gave your soul to the consultancy, and you woke up on a Monday morning very early and waved goodbye to your family and headed off at either motorway or to the airport to fly out to another geography, and then if you were lucky, you got back on Thursday night. Usually it was Friday, and you all of your waking hours and energy in that period was devoted to your consultancy and to your client. But it's probably really useful and helpful that is changing. That we're finding that people want work-life balance. And I wanted work-life balance. It just was not an option in the time that I came through consultancy, but now it is an option. And almost every major consultancy is finding ways to not do that lifestyle, but to try to give people more work-life balance. It's not. I don't think it's that easy, because it's very easy as a consultant to get sucked into the challenges of the problem. Clients don't generally give us easy problems. If they were easy problems, they would already have solved it. So they give us the tough stuff, and then it's very easy to find that you are putting every ounce of yourself into trying to solve that problem, and then work-life balance become sacrificed to deliver for the consultant. But it is changing. I think that the big challenges when you are a consultant, I would probably say, are things like there are things like the one I mentioned, that clients give consultants the most difficult problems, and often their expectations are too high. So we can't overcome problems that mankind has yet to overcome. And so the front edge of consultancy, which is often called contracting, which is really quite important, to make sure that you, as a consultant, you don't end up in the position of having expectations that can't possibly be achieved. And it's a strange balance, because you don't want to set the ambition for what you will do with the client or for the client. You don't want to set it too low, but if it's unrealistic, then the client is going to be disappointed at the end of the day, and they'll probably still pay the consulting fees, but they won't be as delighted as you would have wanted them to be. So there's a kind of inherent challenge in getting that right, because you're always in new territory, and so there's an awful lot of unknowns kicking around, which can trip.
No, I think that's another one, isn't it? You don't navigate, and you always under uncharted territory, because otherwise they wouldn't hire you. If what you're going to do, the consultancy that you bring to the advice that you, if it's something that is well studied and well known, they will just pick the book and follow the instructions. But normally what you have is everything is uncharted. You don't know the unknowns.
You don't, and the client doesn't always tell you either, which is the other thing which happens. That you are, they don't always tell you up front all that you really needed to know to be able to gauge risk well. But that's what happens. And the areas where it's difficult for them to tell you about things are things like organizational politics. So the number of times that I've smacked into problems that I didn't know were there on the political dimension is numerous, and then you have to kind of navigate your way through that. But those are the kinds of, and it's difficult for the client to say, we have a CXO in this position who doesn't entertain any kind of change on this issue at all. It's difficult for them to tell you that because that wouldn't be it wouldn't be politically good for them to do that, particularly if you then later came to the attention of that person. So that is how consultants will brief. But so you have it is a bit of a voyage of discovery sometimes to find out those what to the consultant are unknown unknowns, and because of the pace of technology change at the moment, there are an awful lot of those. I think in applied AI at the moment, I think most applied AI consultants are doing things which they can't be sure are going to work because they haven't been done before, but they kind of have a mental picture that it can work and that it probably will. But certainty is we're living in an age of uncertainty, I think, on so many different dimensions. Well, so that's one of the challenges. I think there are some other inherent challenges of being a consultant, which are about the consultancy itself. Most consultancies you give their consultants things like utilization targets, and they want them to both deliver consultancy and do and produce thought leadership and participate in all sorts of internal forums, and the expectations on consultants by their consultancies are often a problem for a consultancy. For a consultant. And then there's a whole stack of other challenges which come in when you start to manage other consultants, particularly when you become a practice. You lead a practice, because you then have P&L accountabilities, and that is a completely different ball game. That is when life moves from the relative. You don't think it as you're going up the ladder, but at the time you think, well, the relative complexity of dealing with the client's problem. All of a sudden you've got that, and you've got this P&L problem, which manifests itself in all sorts of different ways. So my experience has been things like if you're running a consulting practice, your known revenues peter out after about 3 or 4 months. After 9 months, your projected revenue, your definitive revenues are very small. So you've got 20, 25, 30 consultants. Their school fees and their mortgages depend upon you being able to feed them work, and you can't be sure that it's going to be there. And that keeps you awake at night. So but that's inherent in the consultancy model, that you have to continuously be you're generating the next piece of work, even if it's repeat business within a client. Clients don't typically give you, unless you're on some sort of national multi-year program, and they don't typically give you a guaranteed revenue stream for a long period. So there is that challenge at that level. I've always found that it doesn't matter, because if you're a consultancy practice leader, you are leading a practice. It's one of many practices within an organization, within a larger organization, and it doesn't matter how much revenue or growth you generate. Those above you always want more. So it's it's a classic business development situation that you suddenly find that you've got pressures which once you start to lead practices, or indeed lead assignments, that you didn't have when you were a consultant, and those pressures can be quite considerable.
Right. I think I have answered. You have answered already questions that I had planned. So I just wanted to go back with maybe a more positive note because we were talking about the challenges at the end. You just mentioned at the beginning. I really like you have a quite good craftsmanship with words. You were saying that the way that you combine the world of academia, of consultancy, is when you practice consultancy, you try to bring together all the latest research from academia. Just want to, can you elaborate maybe a little more before we end, and just to get a little bit of a positive note?
I think that the business is on a journey which is making it more and more empirical. So the days when business people were kind of operating in a fairly intuitive way are giving way to businesses like Amazon that are being driven by data and analytics, and increasingly by types of AI. So I think that business itself, whether it's in the services of public sector services or private sector services, have become more rigorous over time, and practices are becoming more sophisticated, and we're optimizing more and making more and more sophisticated decisions. And so some of the rigor that epitomizes academia, the need to kind of use evidence in investigating things thoroughly, and going through a rigorous decision-making process to come up with selected options. That kind of approach is becoming more common in business, and particularly in those businesses that are setting the pace, like Amazon. It's clear that being more analytical is a good way to do business. And so I think that we're entering an era that where in organizations the use of knowledge is becoming more common. We're also entering an economy which is changing. So when I started, which is a long time ago, about 15% of people got degrees, and very few people got PhDs. I never thought for a moment that I would get a PhD. So, but these days we've got we are increasingly have a graduate business population. In fact, we have a graduate citizenship increasingly now, with about 50% of our citizens getting degrees, and we're now becoming increasingly doctoral. So and the idea that people with a doctor title, which I've got, are kind of eggheads that live in this strange world and don't interact with reality is now giving way to this phenomenon of PhD entrepreneurs that are taking their PhD work and turning it into valuable businesses. So I think the mix now is becoming quite interesting. And I think if you kind of project it forwards, then if you kind of go several decades forwards, we find that the business, the role of PhDs in business will become quite important, alongside other capabilities as well. But so those kind of academic skills, those elite academic skills, are now embedded in a lot of businesses. If you think about firms like DeepMind across at Google, which is going to revolutionize so much. It is, if you were to wander around the campus at Cambridge, and then you were to go and work in DeepMind, you probably wouldn't notice much of a difference. It's the same kind of really smart thinking being applied to really difficult problems. And so I think that that is where business is going. Consultancies have always had a very strange situation where they do employ really smart people. So they've stalked the elite business schools for decades, siphoning off their very best MBAs, and now they're siphoning off their very best PhDs. And so I think we are, in consultancy in particular, we're going to find that those skills that academia uses will become a part of what we do to get the very best knowledge deployed for our clients. I think the linkage between academic research that's published in journals and its use in consultancies is still going to be a bit problematic, because there are two different cultures at play, and it is going to be so I think there's still going to be a lot of valuable research done in academia which has potential applications in business, which will still take a while to translate across.
Just come to my mind. I'm just going to ask one of the serious questions. One barrier that the industry has to get information from academic journals, etc., and papers, is that many of these papers are under a paywall, and obviously, big consultancy and small consultancy having money to pay for them, but asking them to pay, they I don't know. Do you think that it has a relationship that they don't have that access, and they don't even bother to think that there is some value to get from that?
I don't think it's access, because if you're in a big five consultancy, you have access through those paywalls to other journals. I mean, I think if you're in a kind of smaller consultancy, then that's more difficult to justify. I think the problem is not so much financial. There is a bit of a pain that there's a paywall. I think the problem is that is time. And academic papers have a certain structure, and they have that structure because that is the way that academia works, and the academics themselves need to follow that structure because that is expected of them, and it's linked into their promotion prospects over time. But we are beginning to see I was beginning to see a couple of things which are interesting. One is the number of academic papers that are coming out of firms like Google and Meta, who have, because what happened at Google is that they went around the world about 20 years ago, probably not 20, 15 years ago, hoovering up the AI academics, particularly from Canada. They tended to be British academics who were getting paid more in America and Canada, but they hoovered a lot of them up and brought them into Google, and we've seen entire teams move from academia into firms like Google. So DeepMind is a team from Imperial, and moved in, and we've also seen academics starting up their own organizations, like Faculty, which is the probably one applied AI firm in the UK, and they'll be doing some stellar work. So we are seeing we are seeing a lot more of what used to be regarded as academic in business now, and it's been interesting to see what happens there. And there are some vehicles for there's a way in which you can get your journal articles out through a medium called Archive, which allows a journal to be lightly peer reviewed. Journal article will be lightly peer reviewed, and most of the AI articles are coming out through that, because they can't come out through the formal journals because it takes too long. Though some of them still come that route through journals like Nature, but there are faster routes now being used for getting particularly AI research, which is out. But they're still following the academic paper structure, which is
the peer review methodology.
Yeah. So I think we're in this really strange flux, which is quite I find it quite encouraging that we are getting more I'm going to use the word scientific here, but I also include social science. I don't just mean the physical sciences, but we are getting more scientific in consultancy and in business generally, public and private sector, more evidence-based, and we are beginning to see some of the tools of academia, which is particularly the notion of the published, refereed journal paper beginning to appear increasingly in some of the most successful of our organizations like Google.
I'm just going to pinpoint on, you just mentioned social science and maybe consulting falls more. You have mentioned Archive as a platform that maybe can be used for publishing and to get information from articles. What about consulting? What would be the best way to get to the best articles in academic consulting?
It's a very good question, and I don't think it's there. I think what we are going to see in consulting, this is me projecting, what we are going to see is the influence of vehicles like GitLab and GitHub and the open source movement begin to spill over into non-IT consultancy. If you are a deeply technical IT consultant, I'm not deeply technical, but I am technical, fairly technical, then you will be using GitHub and GitLab, and you will be putting and places like Medium. You'll be publishing your work, and we'll see consultancy wake up to the fact that actually that's a good thing to do.
You're suggesting to use GitHub not for papers but to learn about technology, right? You just mentioned GitHub and just
Well, the GitHub and GitLab is the kind of research for the physical research equivalent of GitHub. So what we are increasingly seeing people doing is where they can, because some things are proprietary, is to place their work in GitHub for people to access. Now, GitHub has a whole stack of different uses, one of which is a project repository for project teams to work on things together in a private area. But another use of it, and you'll particularly see it in areas like AI, is for particularly open sourced organizations that are open sourcing their tools, their libraries, their code. They'll place it on GitHub, and then people can then come in and build on it. And that's the thing about GitHub. It's not that you it's kind of put there as you might do on a website and say, well, anybody who wants to use it, you're welcome to use it. What GitHub allows you to do is take it and then to build further on it. And so one piece of work can then spawn many variants, which the world then has access to, and it's a really unresolved question, which is going to be played out big time in the AI field and in the software field, around the advantages of open sourcing things, because there have been some spectacular things that have come about. Android would be the classic example. Half the planet is using Android. And there's been some spectacular pieces of human progress that have been open sourced, and now we're beginning to see in the AI field people beginning to wonder should we be open sourcing something or not open sourcing something? Should we be and to what extent should we open source it? Should we give all of the details out, or just enough that people use it? So I think that we might begin to see the emergence of open source consultancy, and that would not be a bad thing. And I think that there are almost certainly whole areas of consultancy where it would be great if we started to open source things, so that we can all work on them together. The tradition has been that consultancies create their product, which is often expressed as a methodology, the XYZ methodology for solving this particular problem in organization. And the XYZ methodology is the best because XYZ said it is. and you can get access to it if you hire us.
I'm incredibly happy with that. It's very cool to have it. No, I completely, I have to recognize that I'm incredibly aligned with you. I have been pro open source since I was in university and probably even earlier. I think intellectual property, IP, sorry, it's something overrated, because yes, you can hire it for a bit. Someone else is going to research it, and with the tools that we have today, probably they're going to be doing the research faster than you can. So it's just going to be a significant advantage for a very little bit. Being there first and cultivate, and so how to actually do it, I think is going to be the recognizable advantage. And in a community where you collaborate more, you're going to win more. So if you share your code, someone else is going to improve it for a different use case. So it's both of you are going to win, because both of you will be grateful for that. I get quite passionate about that.
Yes, Yes, I think the consultancies will be influenced by the software industry in this, and they will start to look more at this, and a lot more consultancy will become software based anyway. It's already a huge slug of consultants.
Yeah. I think I have, oh yeah, last question that I was mentioning regarding consulting. So if you will be looking for papers on consulting, would you go to any particular source? Would you just Google what Google Scholar it, or would you have a different way of approach to find articles in consulting?
Well, I could tell you what I do and have done over the years. There are, if you are a consultant operating at CXO level, because not all consultants do, and if you are in the executive suite, then it's really important that you read the HBR, Harvard Business Review, because those academics that have researched it find that that is one of the most popular journals that CXOs read. They haven't got time to read many things, but the Harvard Business Review and the Sloan Management Review are two that are very frequently read at that level. And they're quite good because they tend not to be too heavy. So if you've had a long day of consulting, the last thing you really want to do is a heavyweight academic journal article. They tend to be quite light. They are peer reviewed. They tend to be the curation of many pieces of research leading up to it, but most importantly, they are what our clients read. So that is really quite important. I think then if you are a consultant, then you will be you'll typically be specialized on two dimensions these days. One will be an industry dimension, so you might be an NHS consultant, or you might be an energy industry consultant, and you'll tend to be working within those because it's just so hard to acquire deep knowledge on many industries. And the other dimension is some sort of specialism. So you might be a business intelligence consultant, or you might be a change management consultant, or you might be a leadership development consultant. But each of those, and so you slot into a little kind of cell on that matrix, and in that cell there will be specialist journals to be looked at, and you've got a choice as a consultant about how much of the academic journals you look into, but there will be in so if you're an energy consultant, there'll be in energy industry journals, but there will also be specialist departments in academia and specialist professors in business schools focused on that industry, who will be churning out very valuable but very dense materials. And so you've got a kind of choice about whether you go into those. So my advice is, you must get the Harvard Business Review. Don't read it cover to cover, but you do need to scan it so that you know what your client is doing. Sloan Management Review is also pretty good if you've got time, and then you've got your specialisms.
Right. I think I have even more that I was expecting, definitely more in time, more that I have been asking. So I just want to thank you again for your time today and for your words.
It's been fun to have those questions cause me to think about these things. I mean, this is very much the kind of work that we're trying to do, isn't it, within the BCS and within the BCS consultancy group, to find things that we can bring together to help people who are either coming into the profession, or indeed they've been in the profession for many years and are still, as we all are, wrestling with the challenges.
Yeah, and I probably, if you ask to 20 different consultants, they're going to have, each of them is going to have their own story, right? Your role as someone, a mediator between two worlds, academic and consultant in industry, is not that common, right? So
I think that's true. I think this conversation might be a good addition to some of the others, because it isn't normal to be a consultant in big consultancies, and having been an academic. I've been a professor. I've been a senior consultant in big consultancies, and that is an unusual combination. I think, as I said at the beginning, it works better if you don't tell anybody. So
yeah, no, I think that has been quite of a ride. So yeah, thank you very much for the answers. Yeah.
no, thank you. Have a good evening, and
You too.
yeah, thanks for the opportunity.